The other pitfall that I commonly see is CIOs, chief information officers. A lot of them are not information officers. A lot of them are technologists.
I think the sticking point, coming back to strategy, and I love strategy of information as your podcast, because there is an absence of an obvious strategy to do this. And in the absence of an obvious strategy, now it might be up to an information governance professional to have to develop the strategy themselves, and then emotionally sell it to a C-suite or a board.
Oh yeah.
Pretty tall order for somebody who got a library sciences degree in 1980.
I mean, again, the good thing there is logic is on our side. So you can convince people that this is the right approach because, I mean, it's plain as day. It's the right approach. The tough sell is convincing people to spend the money to enable the approach successfully, and spending the right amount of money to enable the approach successfully. And we really fail at that because we undervalue information. The other pitfall that I commonly see is CIOs, chief information officers. A lot of them are not information officers. A lot of them are technologists. So
application officers.
Yeah, it's chief systems officer, it's chief technology officer, even though they have chief information officer as their title. And really, the connection between the chief information officer and the information profession, that's often a really large chasm, which is ridiculous. So we need more CIOs who have information knowledge. That's coming along quite nicely as you start to see folks coming out of records and information and data disciplines becoming CIOs, whereas historically it was more IT folks that would work their way up to the CIO position. And that's changing.
I hope so, because I mean, we still bid on deals and get brought into deals. For example, somebody might ask, can you help us with our SharePoint strategy?
Yeah.
And right away, yes, sure.
I see a problem in the question.
Something a little off on the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a SharePoint strategy should be really easy if you have information governance, because your SharePoint strategy is the same as your information governance strategy, just applied to a specific piece of technology.
Yeah.
That's much easier. I mean, early in my career, before information governance was as pervasive as it was, that's exactly the work that I was doing, Jason, was saying, hey, let's apply information governance specific to the system. That's what everybody was doing in those early days. Realizing, pushing it upstream and saying, across companies, across repositories, doesn't matter what the system is, it still has to support the same basic set of principles that we have about our information. And I have to give a little hat tip to my current employer, iPro, for the upstream conversation. They focus heavily on, let's look at that problem at its earliest point and solve for that problem instead of putting band-aids on symptoms.
I like it because it takes the burden then off of the information governance professional, the practitioner, in order to have to do the strategic development and then do the strategic sale within the organization in order to get it financed.
And I mean, that's what we've been doing for the past decade. So in the face of that, we've still built this incredible profession that now exists in, over half of the Fortune 500. That's pretty amazing. Like, if you think about what we as a discipline have accomplished, I don't know, I'm still in awe of it. If you'd asked me 10 years ago how long it would take for people to get, information governance out to this many companies, I'd have expected it to be 25 years. Mm-hmm. And here we are within 10. It's necessary. So people are doing it.
Yeah. And it's like back to the data fitness thing. It is necessary to be fit, but not everybody does it. Fitness doesn't. I'll move it back to maybe our traffic one. We'd still need somebody monitor. I don't want to say police, but I mean somebody monitoring to make sure that the social contract is being held together, that people aren't running red lights and that people aren't going way too fast in the residential area. Those types of things do need to be regulated. Just being fit for the purpose of being attractive is only works for those who are realizing those benefits. I think at the other side, we need some regulation to help out with that. Maybe you could talk about where you stand with that and how infogov.net factors into this.
Yeah, no, and I thank you for this. It's, we have operated in North America in essentially a limited regulation around information. We've got some real basics. Canada, you guys are ahead of us here in the States, where we've got a fragmented mess where states are doing their own things and there's no federal direction whatsoever so far. Meanwhile, over in Europe, night and day. They passed GDPR, the general data protection regulation, and they encoded some of these concepts that those of us in the InfoGov world have been talking about for a really long time. And privacy by design and Ann Kabukian's work really got enshrined within GDPR. So thank you, Ann. Because it really led to a lot of companies rethinking how they are handling their information, because there was finally a bite. If you're mishandling people's information, you will lose money. You will get fined now under GDPR. And we've started to see, the first and second round of GDPR fines coming out, and they're more than slaps on the wrist. So, you're seeing now where North America was leading information governance, along with New Zealand and Australia, mostly because of Susan Bennett and her work with InfoGov ANZ. She did wonderful work down there and has driven information governance in Australia and New Zealand as strongly as we have here in North America. But in Europe, things were lagging behind a little bit. They were much more, more advanced in data management and data governance. But with GDPR, they caught up and have surpassed us. I would say that most companies in Europe are doing a much better job with their information than companies in North America are. And it comes down to what they're required to do. And right now, nobody's required to do a whole heck of a lot here in North America. And it's because there's a lack of regulation. And why is there a lack of regulation? This is more going back in history a bit. The information profession used to have some serious lobbying efforts that were happening up through the 90s with AIM. They had a wonderful lobbying arm, did some amazing work. ARMA also backed out of lobbying efforts. It was a piece of the business that at that moment in time wasn't really supporting the industry. And it was just, viewed as primarily an expense center. So what that has led to is there's not a lot of lobbying that is happening other than for the super huge large cap companies in our space. And that is both good and bad. We at least had somebody lobbying for us, which good. And I honestly think Microsoft deserves a lot of really positive credit for their lobbying efforts. They have protected our profession from a lot of really bad laws, a lot of really potentially harmful regulation, and they've sued regularly. They have a legal arm that's wonderful and a lobbying arm that's quite wonderful. But they're looking out for Microsoft's best interests. When we can hitch our cart to Microsoft's best interest, that's wonderful. And by and large, that's what's happening. They've done wonderful things. Some others in the space, other large cap companies, the Oracles, the SAPs, the Iron Mountains, there are lobbyists out there doing some work at the large cap size. But I think the big gap right now that exists in the North American market is nobody's looking out for the small and middle sized guys, and there are lots and lots of organizations who support information governance, who are leaders in the information governance market, whether it's from a service perspective, consulting perspective, a product perspective. Information governance hasn't been around very long. our information governance companies aren't large cap unless they already existed before. So the Microsofts of the world, they existed before and they're doing wonderful lobbying. But the rest of us have no voice. And it's that where that question that I'm starting to talk to a lot of companies about to try and figure out how we get ourselves out of this situation. And I love AIM and ARMA. They do wonderful work in different areas these days. You know, they've morphed, they've evolved with the times. But lobbying isn't something that I've seen either organization really have an appetite to go back into. Still, it's a losing proposition. It is a sinkhole of money. That said, it's really important for our profession to have a voice, especially when we can see having a voice matters. Look at Europe. Having a voice matters. It matters significantly. So as we're talking about what regulations we need to move information governance forward, yeah, protection of information is important. Protection of personal information is important. Codifying an information governance approach in regulation would have astronomical impact on North American business as well, because we find information governance is a differentiator. It boosts business. So we are currently at a disadvantage to our European counterparts because they have a better regulatory system around information. And, you know, through infogov.net, you know, the plan eventually is to somehow fill this need. We're still early stage. You know, I left ARMA in January. I had a short non-compete in there, so I held off on even talking to anyone about this stuff for a bit, just to really give ARMA their space. But now I'm starting to have these conversations with companies, and you know, I think everyone agrees that there is a need. There's just some discussion around how we fill that need, and you know, there's still a lot more conversation. So if you're listening to this right now and you're like, hey, Nick's onto something, just ping me on Twitter or LinkedIn or something, and let's set up some time to talk, because I want to get as many ideas in here as possible and really make this something that's collaborative and beneficial across the across our profession. Not something that is specifically benefiting any one company, any one association, anything. You know, this is something that we need as a profession. So let's build it.
My reaction when we first talked about this, and now that we recapped it as a smaller organization, we're 63 people and growing. It's we must have outcomes with our customers. Otherwise, there's no word of mouth, and there's no growth, and there's no reference selling. Whereas somebody like SAP or Microsoft, fantastic companies with fantastic products, if you buy their product and you fail, it's your failure. And therefore, their interest is slightly different with respect to their lobbying. And I think there's something that can be done with respect to this governance and lobbying that can help ensure the outcomes, not just ensure people are using the right tool.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we die for a lack of standards and a lack of regulation. It's there's a lot that can be done, but we haven't really hit that stride yet. And it's great that we do have lobbying efforts that are happening. I think that, you know, it's just not representing the entirety of the profession. It's a giant donut hole right now. And the only voices that are being heard, I mean, on Capitol Hill, particularly in the States, it's the voices of the large caps. And there are a lot of great mid-sized companies. I work for one, you own one. There are a lot of great mid-size and growing companies that are, you know, coming to the fore as leaders in the information governance space who really don't have a voice right now in government. And, you know, most people don't realize when I was running the Info Coalition and InfoGovCon, I actually took a leave of absence to lobby. So I live in Providence, Rhode Island. And our governor at the time was putting forward a a proposal to give tuition-free community college to every graduating high schooler in the state. And I thought, whoa, that's huge. Rhode Island, has a legacy in fishing and manufacturing. So we're not the most educated state in the Northeast of the United States. We've got Massachusetts above us with its bajillion colleges. We have Connecticut to the side of us with its bajillion colleges. And Rhode Island was really lagging behind in education. So I took a leave of absence from InfoGovCon and Info Coalition for about 4 months, 4 months, and lobbied on behalf of this proposal at the Rhode Island State House. And we won. And now every graduating high schooler in Rhode Island can opt to get 2 years of tuition-free college at our local community college. So change is possible through lobbying. And I really lived that experience as something that many people in the state didn't think was possible, but was, when we actually crunched the numbers, completely affordable, less than 0.5% of our state budget to educate at a large scale, massive numbers of people, and educate in a more equitable manner, making it so that everybody has access to education, not just the people with means. So you can make change happen, but you need to have a seat at the table and you need to have a voice. I was lucky in that I could take a leave of absence at that time. We weren't running a conference in that moment, so it's between the conference moments. But I felt very fortunate that I was able to do that. We don't have that happening right now on behalf of our profession. And that's problematic because we don't have a voice. And when we don't have a voice, we don't have progress, despite the fact that we're making serious strides without these regulations. I'm just thinking, man, if you could make it so that it was mandated that companies at least have written down what their information, basics of their information policies, basics of their information stance, that every company needs to have that as a written document. Just think of that small action, the impact of that would be to our profession. It would be massive. It would be massive because then people would start, looking at how you do that. And the basics of that lead to the advanced versions of that. You get people going down the path. And then, our companies are more secure. Our IP is more secure. We talk about how much of our IP is getting stolen by bad actors at, the hacking level, group level, and even state-sponsored hacking that we see coming from China, North Korea, Russia. Like, all of this could be bolstered and helped if there were appropriate regulation. But right now, there's just not enough incentive because the regulatory fines that companies get about information, it's so little here in North America that it's a cost of doing business. Them protecting our information or not protecting our information is an acceptable cost of doing business. That can't stay.
Yeah, the motivations that we find are generally around, there has been a safety incident and they've been forced to do this, or they failed an audit, or they failed a massive litigation. Generally, somebody's got their butt kicked a little bit to help them along the journey. It would be nice to preempt that with a little political motivation would be helpful.
And look, I don't know if at the end of the day, this is something that I end up doing or I do in partnership with other people, or really I'm just waving the flag and somebody else comes along and does it. I'm at the stage right now where there's an identified problem and we're having the conversations to see, what people's ideas are on how we can help solve it.
No, I really like that. To me, it is essential. And part of essentialism is exploring what is available to you so you can make the best possible decisions. And I think that leads to the strategy, and it leads back to how does this all fit together?
Yeah. And I mean, it's pretty easy to envision what it would look like if we had some basic regulation, like really basic regulation. I mean, if we were to have a GDPR level piece of regulation pass in the States or up in Canada, like that would be pretty transformative in ways that I have a hard time envisioning how American companies some American companies actually achieve that based on their activities thus far around information.
Well, and to me, going back to what's the opposite of exploring what's available to you? It's exploiting what you already have. And I think what you're really disrupting is this whole idea of, I've got a business here and it's working. I'm employing people and they're paying tax and we're kind of staying healthy. So what's the problem? And it's more of this exploitive nature. And before you know it, they're blockbustered out of business or something like that. It's if you're not exploring at the same time you're exploiting, you are essentially turning yourself into a dinosaur.
Well, and also it's not just the laggard companies that are being exploited. It's us, not as professionals, but as people who work with these companies. They hold our information. You know, I'm a T-Mobile subscriber. They had a massive data breach. Well, guess who's got to look at their credit report every month to see how, you know, if somebody has used my information? Why is that onus on me to now continually check my credit report because the company that I work with screwed things up? That is a regulatory problem.
Yeah, and a fantastic example. And I love it because the scale is so astronomical that prevention is kind of the only cure.
Yeah. And we have the tools out there. What we don't always have is the will. Like, there are lots of great information governance software tools that are out there to help enable information governance. There are lots of great consulting groups that are out there enabling information governance. We perish for a lack of desire. You know, the companies don't necessarily want to do the right thing because the incentives aren't necessarily in the right places right now. The financial incentives primarily aren't necessarily in the right places to make information governance the type of institutional imperative that it needs to be in companies to move forward.
I'm talking to Nick Inglis, the Director of Information Governance at iPro, host of the Strategy of Information. You can find him at infogov.net. Thanks a lot, Nick. This was a lot of fun.
This was super fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity. This was an incredible time just chatting with you. We'll have to do the reverse and have you on the Strategy of Information when I kick off our next season.
That sounds awesome. Thank you.